Welcome to, in fact, our last session of study of the Heart of Compassion instruction on the 37 verses on the practice of the bodhisattva. So basically, what we've looked at here is the view and practice of a bodhisattva, and what we mean with a bodhisattva. Someone who is dedicated to complete enlightenment and to complete enlightenment for all sentient beings. And we very often would define the vision or the objective, the goal of the bodhisattva to establish all sentient beings in perfect liberation. That's really what the bodhisattva is about. And this is where in this text we distinguish between three different kinds of individuals. There's the individuals that want just peace for themselves. Then there are those who want enlightenment for themselves, not just going to heaven or being comfortable, but actually being free of samsara, being free of the very root of suffering, but really just for themselves. So it's the aspiration to enter into peace, what we could call the lesser nirvana. But then there's the third kind of individual, what we call the superior individual, who is not content with this so just personal peace or even just personal enlightenment, but really has his or her eye on the fact that there's suffering everywhere and not being able to bear that. The bodhisattva is somebody who's dedicated to complete and perfect enlightenment. And also from the point of view that as long as there still is this personal agenda, even if it's for enlightenment for oneself, if it's just a personal agenda, there's still that person that's there, which is really the cause of suffering. So you could actually never have enlightenment, full enlightenment, full awakening, as long as there still is this notion of wishing peace for oneself. So in this way, the two come together. The wisdom that knows reality, that's free from self, and also the compassion that is dedicated to the welfare of all sentient beings. So essentially, the bodhisattva is endowed with these two qualities, wisdom and compassion. So the 37 verses of the practice of the bodhisattva are pith-instructions on how to implement this view and practice. So we've covered that really. We looked at how this for the superior individual, then there's the bodhicitta of what we call aspiration, the bodhicitta of application. These two, what we call the two kinds of bodhicitta. And let me just actually verify that that I'm not sitting. Yeah, the bodhicitta of intention, the bodhicitta of application, that's what it's called here. And then with that also the trainings. So presently we're then looking at elucidating some of the verses from there, and that's where some of the we have 5 appendixes that we're going to look at today, which are in the back of the book, and they very much draw on the commentary. Partly from, of course, from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, but Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche here is also drawing on Tsachul, somebody called Tsachul Nawang Norbu, and he was also known as Rongbu Sanje. He lived. He was the teacher of the late Kyabje Trulchik Rinpoche, and he lived just on the other side of Mount Everest. And Trulchik Rinpoche lived at his monastery, which is near the place called Tingri. So if you're traveling from Lhasa in Tibet and you're heading down to Kathmandu in Nepal, you actually pass by this place where Tsachul Nawang Norbu he lived. This monastery called Rongbu, and Tsachul was known as incredibly saintly. And hence, Ngulchu Rinpoche, when he left Tibet, he really just moved around Mount Everest to the other side and settled in Sulukhumbu, where he then established his seat, Thupten Choling. But anyway, the present commentary then is based on his comments, and we're looking at verse number 6 among the 37, and it says, "Through reliance on a true spiritual friend, one's faults will fade, and good qualities will grow like a waxing moon. To consider him or her even more precious than one's own body is the practice of a bodhisattva." So this is why we have gurus. This is very different from the notion of a teacher in the Western sense, which is very often somebody who knows something, they have a speciality, and then they go home, and then that's the end. Whatever philosophy they might be teaching at the university or whatever, that's just their teaching at the university, and of course it might influence them. But in the Buddhist context, a teacher is not somebody who just knows something and expounds it. A teacher is somebody whose entire being is permeated by truth. Somebody who's completely transformed their person, not so much changing it from one way to another, but more transformed in the sense of having uncovered this natural innate disposition of purity. And that's where such a person is not just a charismatic, interesting person, but someone like that is somebody who is completely embodying truth. And so being around someone like that, however that person's character might be, or however their style might be, and it might even be very different from us, our style. But the bottom line is that there is this truth, this quality of truthfulness, honesty. So that's why even we might be laypersons, we can still learn from a monk or a nun. Even though somebody might be Tibetan and we might be, not Tibetan, then it doesn't really matter, because this quality of truth is something that has to do with removing confusion altogether. So it's not about behavior, it's not about particular lifestyle or what is said or done. It's about this elimination of confusion and bringing forth this truthful quality. But that said, there are, as we know, there are teachers and teachers. There's there's genuine teachers and not so genuine teachers. And unfortunately nowadays, well, it has always been like that, but it's particularly in the modern world where there's not really a tradition of enlightenment, then there's very often something like the spiritual path is sort of shrouded in mystery. And for that reason, then all sorts of deception seems to be able to take place. Whereas in traditional Buddhist contexts, there's much more of a unyielding quality control. It's not that you don't have false teachers in Buddhist societies traditionally, but there's less of it, and there's more a sense of knowing exactly how to see who's genuine, who's not, and also there's a general culture of just knowing what's a true teacher and who's not. So so we definitely, regardless, need to know what a wrong teacher is like. So that's where we would say a wrong teacher is somebody who hasn't studied. They might have some sense of divine, they all came to them all of a sudden or what have you. But in the Buddhist context, there's a very real science. You need to actually apply yourself to rational study and really understand. And that's the foundation then for the path. And it's on the basis of the path then that one generates meditative experience. And on the basis of that, uncovers the abiding innate wisdom through eliminating confusion. But that requires really a genuine application and practice of the path. A wrong teacher is somebody who hasn't done that, who hasn't studied, who hasn't practiced meditation, and as a consequence also who doesn't really have any genuine realization. They might be charismatic or interesting or whatever, but they haven't penetrated down to the actual truth of their being. Such a person could have countless faults, and they might hide them. There might be all sorts of, let's say, appearances, but certainly when we are looking for a teacher, we should be very attentive to if this is somebody who, for example, might be arrogant, might be proud, might be jealous. And this is, of course, where we need to stick around and see if this is actually the fact. If the teacher has no compassion, no love or compassion. I remember living in France with my teachers, Tugupema Wangyal and his family, his mother, Amala, and sisters and brothers. And what was extraordinary about these persons that came from, basically from Tibet, had lived for some decades in India, was that they could actually get along with everybody. Even people who were Catholics and lived in this little village where they settled and where the sort of Buddhist retreat center sprang up. There was this deep respect between the Buddhists and the local people. And that's where you could say that love and compassion is something that's so universal. It sort of seeps into the communication. And regardless of however, you could say foreign, you couldn't think of more foreign people than people who came from Tibet. Or in some of the people in this village, they had some of them we know actually had never, the furthest, remember there was one man living there, the furthest they had ever gone was 20 kilometers away to the nearest little town. And so yet within such, you could say, an isolated insular sort of context, the presence of compassion is just so universally there, beyond boundaries of culture and language. Anyway, so that's where we should really see that if you come across a teacher who sort of might set themselves up, but all of a sudden they're at war with the world around them, or maybe says we are on the right path and everybody else is wrong, then that's a pretty good indication that this is probably not somebody you want to study with. And such a teacher like that is not a refuge. The right teacher then should be someone who has studied both in the case of obviously Tibetan Buddhism, we're talking about both having studied the sutras, the Tripitaka, the gradual path, and also the tantric approach, the resultant vehicle, and really understand how these two fit together and actually united them. So such a person has an understanding of what we call the three vows, which are the vows of the monastic vows of individual liberation, the bodhisattva vows of the Mahayana, and the Vijayadhara vows of the Vajrayana. Such a person then, and this means that these people, they might be monastics, and yet they also are bodhisattvas. They might also be at the same time tantrikas. And even if they're tantrikas, they also have the foundation of the individual liberation and the discipline and the renunciation. They have the bodhicitta of the Mahayana training that we just studied here in the 37 verses of a bodhisattva's practice. And so these three vows, can operate together seamlessly. And above all, such a person possesses warmth, possesses compassion, kindness. They are in this world out of caring for others. And moreover, such as a teacher is able to clarify the student's doubts, understand the student's confusion, and they're also able to clarify to the student how confusion, how samsara arises, how it can be remedied through the path, and how it can bring about enlightenment. So this is the qualification of the right teacher, somebody who's very clear, who can really help the student. And that's where we talk about what's called Duoboshi, the four aspects of gathering disciples, or four ways of gathering disciples. And it might sound a little bit funny, but the first is actually giving presents, and it refers more to meeting the student where they're at. But it might require something as corny as just giving stuff away. And then also you could say establishing communication, not putting others not being confrontational or putting others on the defensive, but really establishing a common ground of understanding. That's speaking gently. And then knowing the student, then teaching in accordance to what they can understand in their particular disposition. And then, of course, walking the talk, behaving in accordance with what he or she is teaching. So this kind of person influences us, not just in terms of the information and the data that we download from them, but also just through their character. Because they're even more important, their character. We model our character on them. We're inspired by their character, their greatness, their kindness. So we would say, to be with, like Rinpoche says, it's like logs that sit around in a forest of a sandalwood forest. They also, even they're just ordinary wood, they end up smelling like sandalwood. So, so you want to stick around noble beings, and even if you can't stick around them, then just soaking oneself in their culture, studying the Buddhist teaching, especially nowadays where we have YouTube. We can actually, there's many of the teachers who we can actually engage and have a sense of their being through hearing them teach. So, how to follow such a teacher? Well, the most important thing is that we don't take them as just granted. That we're not in it just because we want to hang out with somebody who's really spectacular, or we want to get a contact high from their person. We shouldn't really approach the teacher in this kind of materialistic, self-serving way. We might have a teacher that appears just out of compassion for us as ordinary, but a genuine qualified teacher is somebody who is completely free of any confusion, any selfishness, any self-centering, and that's something that might be completely hidden. They might appear very ordinarily. They might just be humble, ordinary persons. I remember Khyentse Rinpoche talking about how in the subway in New York City, he came across this great master from Tsongsa Monastery in Tibet, and he was punching tickets down in the subway. So you might have really great teachers that could be very, very ordinary. Such a teacher also we'd notice that they would never ever, if people might not be kind to them, they might be ungrateful, they never react, that never bothers them. I remember also Khyentse Rinpoche, sometimes I've seen him be sort of treated really rough and people abusing him, or sometimes just not getting it or anything. And Rinpoche just has never seen him actually out of, you could say, never out of sort of being fatigued or fed up reacting to anybody like that. And the same with Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. Never ever saw Rinpoche in any way being, you could say, thrown by people's, however they might be. So when we're around somebody like that, we should actually venerate them. We should respect them. There's something called the 50 verses of Guru devotion. And in there, it gives you all the details about how you should behave around the teacher, not walk on their shadows, and, when you speak their name. Like sometimes some of my friends who are new to the Dharma, they'll refer to Khyentse Rinpoche, they'll just say, oh yeah, Khyentse, he said that. There's a story actually of somebody who came to see Je Tsongkhapa, and he requested if the Lama was in, and there was a nun there, and she came out. He asked this question to the nun. Before answering, the nun lit a stick of incense, and holding this, she then said, "The Lord Refuge, Je Tsongkhapa, whose name is hard to utter. He is in residence." So this means that you would actually, she was really just, before even mentioning his name, she was, really taking very being very serious about how the name is significant. Sometimes actually in writings, some of the traditional writings, you would see how teachers refer to their teachers or other great beings as the one whose name is hard to pronounce. So anyway, we should have this deep respect. The more we have deep respect, the more actually we can gauge, the more we can we can receive. The more we actually open to what we call blessings, something that goes deep within our being. So there's a lot to be said. Like I mentioned, there's this work called the 50 Verses of Guru Devotion. And Khyentse Rinpoche also talks about that here in some detail, about how to behave, how not to, if you're a great yogi or whatever, you don't immediately with the guru, you sort of go into full lotus position and show yourself. Just sort of sit humbly and attentively, gently. Also, there's a few details. But the thing is, nowadays, in the crossover between cultures, there's a lot of us who actually don't know how to behave. And we might think that's really important. Well, it's nice wherever you go to be sensitive to the culture that you're there. But the most important really is to just be open and respectful. So you might not have the white scarf. You might, not know where to put your shoes, or, for some reason, you just might not conform with a traditional formula for how exactly to approach a great being. But if there's openness and respect, then that's okay. Then that's all right. It's never as if there's going to be, if we're talking about qualified teachers, genuine lamas, they're never ever going to be upset if somebody doesn't know how to behave. They'll just think it's sweet, probably, They won't really, they won't be profoundly offended for sure. Yeah, maybe some of the narrow-minded attendants, the people around them might get a little bit sort of like that. But even so, nowadays there's a lot of understanding of how we come from different cultures. But there is still something that has to do with how we behave, and that is this openness, respect, being aware that there's something to be learned here. Also, when we go and see the teacher, we shouldn't spend a lot of time telling all about ourselves. Like, oh yeah, Rinpoche, before I start, I should first tell you about myself, and then we go on. That's one of the qualities of a teacher. We don't actually need to tell them. It's just like if you go to a good Chinese doctor or a good Tibetan doctor, you don't need to tell them what your illness is. They'll take your pulse. And similarly, a spiritual teacher, we don't need to tell the whole story about our background. We just need to say, I really like this teaching. Please, can you clarify this? What should I do in this particular context? Or if we need a particular teaching, of course, then we say, please teach this teaching. So now, because the teacher is so important, then there's a particular way where we actually skillfully could interact with the teacher. And sometimes, like I said, we could go with the teacher and we get a contact high. But then after we've been with the teacher, then we leave. And then with this contact high might fade. And that's actually where we might actually have some inspiration of something deep and might have some experience of what we call blessing. But that might fade. The thing is, the guru is ultimately beyond time and space. The guru is really just somebody who shows the guru that's inside us. And so the guru is somebody who is essentially showing us that which is ultimate. And that's where the practice of recollecting, being really, you could say, really benefiting from the teacher is to recollect the teacher at all times. And that's what is essentially the Guru Yoga practice, to recollect the teacher and also to fuse, to mingle, to mix our mind with the teacher's mind, the teacher's wisdom. But of course, before there's any notion of having a guru or doing Guru Yoga, we have to find a teacher who is a genuine teacher. One aspect we would say that characterizes a teacher is somebody that actually has a lineage. It's not somebody who just sort of do-it-yourself guru out of the blue all of a sudden has some revelation, but somebody who really has received the teaching that comes down from the Buddha to the teacher. So that's where we talk about lineage. That's essential. And once the teacher has that, then there's two kinds of transmission that the teacher embodies, which is the theoretical teaching, the scriptures, knowing that, and also the actual experience of what is being taught in these scriptures. So that's where we talk about Lungchu and Togmé, the Dharma of transmission and the Dharma of realization. What has been heard and what has been experienced. Now, to approach such a teacher, we actually would, you could say, to engage, we need to actually give something. For us to actually really have the conditions for properly receiving something, then we need to make material offerings. This can be just very simple things. Maybe just a few oranges if we're beggars. And otherwise, we offer what we can. And then also even more significant is offering our service. We can help the teacher, perhaps with our body, our speech, our mind, just in various ways actually to be available. The highest kinds of way of serving the teacher and following the teacher is actually practicing. So that's the way in which we could really serve the teacher in the highest way with practice. The point of Guru Yoga is that we open ourselves, we surrender, and we're touched by the teacher's nature, and that's what we can call blessing. It's something that bypasses our ordinary confused mind. It's a deep place of being touched, being moved by the teacher's presence. So this we call blessing. And to receive blessing requires that we have openness and genuine appreciation for the teacher, devotion. And to really continually generate that openness and devotion that allows for blessing, we practice Guru Yoga as something that is really key to all of Vajrayana. And in some way, it's also actually present in other Buddhist yanas in what we call Buddha Anusmriti, or in the context of Khyentse and Ngulchu's teaching, he has something called Tri Ratna Anusmriti. And it's just recollecting the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, or recollecting the Buddha. That's something that brings about this very special atmosphere where if we have this openness and this surrender, there's something that touches us very deeply. And this bypasses this ordinary process of maybe being a bit calmer, being a little bit wiser, being a little bit more compassionate, it actually enables something that's much more direct and touches us much more deeply. So this is something that's very significant, this practice of Guru Yoga, and particularly then, of course, for the Vajrayana. So why we're continually coming back to this notion of us gaining an insight that is deep is understanding really something that has not always been clear to us, which is the absence of self and the absence of solidity in our world. And that's something that's not obvious to the confused mind that's so stuck in our projections, in our obscurations. And it's on the basis of the path then that we free ourselves. And this freedom we call realization. And without actually being on the path where we gain realization, there will never be enlightenment. We might not know what enlightenment is, but the teacher is somebody who shows us a reflection of enlightenment. The teacher's body, the teacher's speech, the style and the atmosphere around the teacher reflects enlightenment. So that's why we should really recognize the value of a teacher, and we should be skillful in attending him or her. Like we saw before, this can be through material offerings, through service, and particularly the practice of the teacher's teaching. So Khyentse Rinpoche says, you should also know how to serve such a master. You must truly accomplish whatever he or she says through your actions and in your words and thoughts. Pray to him or her constantly with great favor, meditating on them at the center of your heart or above your head. So practically, and in here you actually have a Guru Yoga that's sort of described. It's drawn from the Treasury of Spiritual Instruction. It's written by Dilgo Khyentse, and there's 3 parts to this. So we're just basically just referring to it. I don't think there's the actual liturgy, even though Rinpoche refers to this. I'm not sure that we have the actual liturgy translated. But anyway, this is general for how we practice Guru Yoga. We first take refuge. We generate bodhicitta. We then visualize ourselves as pure. This means that we don't see ourselves in our ordinary karmically constructed form, but you could say in concordance with our primordial nature. We visualize ourselves as just light, and then we consider, or as deity, and then we consider the teacher then vividly present, sitting on the crown of our head, and then we recollect the teacher. We think of him or her, we invoke their presence. It's important not to get too stuck, you know. Some will be sort of not, they won't be able to practice because they're not sure if the guru is facing out or facing this way or this, that, and the other. Sure, sometimes there are some details, and that's of course helpful, but the main thing is really that we just have the presence of the teacher. So we might say, oh, I can't visualize. But that doesn't really matter. Visualizing can be helpful, but the main thing is that we have this recollection of the teacher. And then we supplicate the teacher. There's various ways of supplicating the teacher, sometimes with prayers, sometimes with mantras. Here, Khyentse Rinpoche, and I think we have a translation then on what Jakob Rinpoche wrote. He says, bless me so that the bodhicitta in its 2 aspects may take birth in me right now, just as it took birth in the minds of the precious spiritual teachers of the lineage, just as it dwells in the wisdom mind of the Buddhas and bodhisattvas, and just as it is described in the sutras of the ultimate direct meaning. Bless me, so that whether I meet prosperity or ruin, renown or infamy, happiness or suffering, whether I am sick, dying, transmigrating, or being reborn, I may actualize the 2 kinds of bodhicitta. Bless me that I may know how to use all difficulties and obstacles as friends along the path. So at the end, we after supplicating the teacher, and sometimes also we have a mantra, but then at the end, we dissolve the duality, the reference of the teacher as external. And there's where we would consider the teacher's wisdom mingles within our mind. And we then settle. We then remain in this vastness, free from any reference points, which is permeated then by the blessing of the teacher, the presence of the teachers. And the real quality of the teacher doesn't lie in something that we think of the teachers, he's lots of fun, or he's very, very kind, or something that's beyond any reference point, beyond object, subject, and object. So just to remain in that vastness, this is then the ultimate kind of Guru Yoga. And then we conclude. So having initially engaged in this practice with the wish to benefit all sentient beings, then we at the end also dedicate all the merit there might be to all sentient beings, and we aspire that we may always serve all sentient beings. So the benefit of the Guru Yoga practice is immediate and ultimate benefits, that we have temporary benefits. Could be that we get less confused, that we're kinder, that we're happier. And ultimate benefits is that we're freed from our ordinary obscurations, duality and confusion at a basic level. And also this enables us to be more clear in terms of understanding our true nature, so at the time of death, we're not confused. In general, we would say the benefit of the Guru Yoga is that anything we aspire to in terms of the path will be fulfilled. So Rinpoche says there are boundless ordinary and extraordinary benefits to this meditation. To mention a few of them, you will not be harmed by either human or non-human beings. You will attain all worldly and supra-mundane perfections, and you will actualize all instructions and teachings. The 2 stages of this meditation will accomplish the transfer of consciousness into great luminosity and thus serve as the essential instruction needed at the time of death. If you persevere with this meditation, you will achieve whatever spiritual realization you aspire to. Yeah, somebody says that they aspire to meet teachers, great teachers. There are still great teachers in this world, and if we aspire to it, we should never think, oh, I haven't met teachers. We should say, I would like to meet teachers. We should look at the half-empty glass. There are teachers in this world. May I meet with them? There's still some extraordinary great teachers alive. So we should not despair that we haven't met them, but rather we should make aspirations that we will meet them. Yeah. So supplementary commentary on desire. So that's verse 21, which reads, sense pleasures and desirable things are like salt water. The more one tastes them, the more one's thirst increases. To abandon promptly all objects which arouse attachment is the practice of a bodhisattva. Wow. I'm getting thirsty all of a sudden. So, the dangers of meat, alcohol, and sex. So, throughout the Buddhist teaching, we actually warn about these 3. Now, there's sometimes we would say, oh, tantrikas, they're always, they're practicing. They're not celibate. They have sex. Some of them drink alcohol. They eat meat, and so on. Yeah, that happens. But these tantrikas, they really, it's like sitting on a razor's edge. And if they're for real, they'll be fine. If they're not, they'll be destroyed. So we shouldn't dabble in that. And one of my friends once asked Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, saying, Rinpoche, should we behave like you behave? Because Chögyam Trungpa definitely didn't deny any of these 3. And Trungpa Rinpoche said that would be suicidal. And that's absolutely clear that great sages, and I've also had the privilege to meet some great sages whose behavior was outrageous, but there was never anything frivolous about it. And the people around were deeply grateful, even for you could say, these beings. So we shouldn't look at them and then think, oh yeah, well they do it, then I'm going to do it too. It doesn't work like that. And that's why universally there is this prescription against these 3. Padmasambhava, who of course is the founder of Tibetan Buddhism in many ways, and particularly associated with the Nyingma tradition, where very often you have people in the Nyingma tradition who just seem to think that it's totally okay to drink a lot of beer, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything. And yes, if there is some great tantrikas who do it, it's because they are great tantrikas. And so Padmasambhava, just like the Buddha would have done, warns that beer is one of the main roots of suffering in the 3 worlds. This is the downfall of so many individuals, so many families, so many tragedies. Also, eating meat. That's also contrary to the Mahayana. A lot of us eat meat, and it's basic to a lot of cultures. And of course, in Tibet, there was a lot of meat eating, but it is, and even the most diehard meat-eating Tibetan would have to acknowledge that it would be good not to eat meat. And so as much as Tibetans eat meat, they actually would also say, oh, so good if you can not eat meat. And what's actually happened more and more is actually in the modern world, where they're no longer limited to the situation as it was in Tibet. There are many Tibetans who are not vegetarians, and not only vegetarians, actually vegans. So this is something that we aspire to, being free from not eating meat. And then also sex. As we all know, how many love songs are about broken hearts, and almost some of the greatest human tragedies has to do with romance and what comes with the sex. Of course, there's cheap sex and then there's romance, but all of it sort of associated with libido is something that creates a lot of complications. Let's face it. It's sometimes we look at the monastics and we think, oh, they're missing out. They're missing out on all the the things like romance and so on. But actually, in the Tibetan tradition, this is something I so often encountered: is that the monastics actually they feel sorry for the lay people because they might not be having a lot of sex, admittedly, but or they don't have sex, right? But at the same time, it's kind of it's not that big of a drama, really, and many of them just think, gosh, these poor lay people, what they go through. So the atmosphere within the monastery is actually, wow, that we're so fortunate. And the lay people, Tibetan lay people also, they would sort of say, yeah, the monks, they have it really good, or the nuns have it really good. So we have that. There is these three, they can get in the way of the path. Trungten, who is the main student of our teacher, says alcohol taken to the point of drunkenness is not a samaya substance. And this is because in some of the tantric scriptures, it would say you should take a little bit of alcohol. But to the point of drunkenness, that's definitely not the practice. And Jetsun Milarepa, alcohol fuels cravings and cuts the life of liberation. Milarepa, of course, yes, he was a tantrika, but living in the caves of the Himalayas, not a lot of heavy drinking going on there, really. And at the same time, also so clear how alcohol can be the cause of ruin. Gampopa, who is then the student of Milarepa, says sinful meat, intoxicating beer, and deceiving young companions. These are deadly poisons for the Dharma practitioner. If you want to do genuine practice, give these up. And a great master from Repkong in Amdo, Jetsun Khyentse Gyatso, he says, crave the taste of delicious food, the smooth contact of soft clothes, the enchanting form of beauties, and the profound Dharma will be left far behind. So these are some important points. Now we're going to look at meditation. And here it's commentary on verse 29. It says, knowing that through profound insight, thoroughly grounded in sustained calm, the disturbing emotions are completely conquered, to practice the concentration which utterly transcends the four formless states is the practice of a bodhisattva. So these two aspects, we have what's called shamatha and vipassana. So knowing that through profound insight, that's vipassana. Vipassana doesn't just come like that. It has to be essentially cultivated within the container of shamatha, which is sustained calm. So we have the calm aspect of meditation that enables us you could say, enables the confusion to settle, like water that becomes clear when we don't agitate it. So with that, then the ordinary confusion and the addiction to the dramas of our afflictive emotions, disturbing emotions, they are eliminated. And we then enter into a concentration that shouldn't be about just staying in peace, just staying in a sort of a peaceful, blissful state. Profound insight goes beyond just that kind of settling, and that's why there's not really any attachment to what we call the formless states. So we have various formless states, which is something that could happen for persons that practice, and it really just refers to these sort of transcendent conditions of jhana or meditative absorption. And that's not really seen as being particularly helpful. So to really actually get to the bottom of our confusion, that's the practice of a bodhisattva. And that's the purpose of meditation. So the first aspect is then the who wrote this? Sustain calm and sustain calm, sustain calm. Okay, well, clearly he's on to sustain calm here. So that's good. That's lovely. Okay, let's see here. Okay. So first we're looking at sustain calm, which we call shamatha. So how to meditate on this? The preliminary conditions for shamatha meditation is that it's good to have calm surroundings. So of course we might not be living in a sort of the ideal neighborhood for retreat practice, but that doesn't really matter. As long as we have some boundaries where we could have some peace, if we can find a place where we could have some peace, that's very helpful. And then we need the determination. This is the foundation really of the Buddhist path, that we have this determination to be free. We sometimes translate this as renunciation, but more than anything, it's really just that we're clear on what it is we want to do and what we don't want to do. Then we need to apply the antidotes for a particular affliction. So we might have a lot of anger, so that's why it's necessary to meditate on kindness. We might have a lot of desire, that's where we need to sober up with some reflection on whether it really is what we're sort of imagining that it is. And we also sometimes might be a bit just unaware of things, and that's where it's helpful to actually understand the complexity or the dependently arisen nature of things. So we talk about antidotes for particular afflictions. Anyway, Rinpoche, he describes this in some detail. So then when we meditate, so we begin with an attitude of wishing to benefit all sentient beings. We offer the 7 branches, which is prostration, offering, confession, rejoicing, requesting to teach, requesting to not pass into nirvana, and dedication. And this we have in different liturgies in different ways. And then we sit, we adopt the 7-fold posture of Vairocana, the actual posture. Now there's 3 types of meditation. There's focusing on an object of mindfulness, such as a Buddha statue. So that's the first. And when we do that, then we remedy what happens when we're focusing on an object of mindfulness, for example, Buddha Shakyamuni. And actually, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche has written a very beautiful commentary that goes together with the Buddha practice that we often do. And that's where we use the Buddha, imagining the Buddha in the space in front of us as the object of mindfulness. Sometimes we use the breath. We have to have something where we don't just sit and speculate what's happening with my mind. Just something where we focus. The Buddha, the breath, flower, whatever it might be. We're just something that where we don't sit and, ruminate and regurgitate storylines and narratives and just think. So we get out of our heads, essentially, with the practice of mindfulness. And we could then sustain this presence. But we also inevitably, since it's our habitual nature to just be entangled in distraction, we could very well get easily disturbed. There are different things that we would say are really something that gets in the way. The first is laziness. But laziness here is not just being slothful, it's also maybe sometimes being overly busy because we want to avoid. And it's also being just despondent, thinking, oh no, I could never do anything, great or spiritual, whatever. So that's laziness. Then when we sit down, we meditate, and then we the situation of what is it actually I'm supposed to be doing? So that's forgetfulness. We forget the instructions that we received. I have a very sweet story. This was in the late 70s, and I was receiving teachings from, together with, by the way, about 1,000 other people. We were all receiving teachings from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. And I was staying with this wonderful Kampa woman. She was a very colorful person, and her husband and grandchild. But she was very devoted, and she always she had this little painting. No, she didn't have it, but she one day she said, "Oh yeah, in her family they used to practice Vajrayogini." She was in the Sakya tradition. And I said, "Okay, but you should really go down and ask Rinpoche for some teachings." And oh, I could never go to a great Lama and ask for instructions. And of course, we were less held back by some of this, you could say, traditional sort of how do you say, awe. So we would go and request teachings from Rinpoche. He said, my friend Eric Schmidt, Eric Tamakanzang and I, we were said, come on, you should go and ask him for teachings. She went down and she very timidly asked for some teachings, like Katag and so on. And Rinpoche says, I can teach you, but you won't remember it. She says, oh, please teach me. And we were there saying, yeah, Rinpoche, she will remember. And then Rinpoche taught her very kindly, actually. She was so happy. She was so happy. And then she came back and we said, okay, do you remember what you said? And she says, no. She was just so in awe of Rinpoche. That's also what's very helpful, to have things written down, you know. And so anyway, she knew the mantra, and of course she knew the basics. She was just, I think, overwhelmed, and then choosing to say that she couldn't remember things. But I'm sure she remembered some really important things, you know. And I remember she had a little target painted on Vajrayogini, and she then would do this practice. But it's important that we remember the instruction, and then we should if we're getting too high or excited, you know, when we're meditating, we might sort of get just this out. So that's where we should ground ourselves a little bit, and if we're dull, then we should inspire ourselves, lift ourselves. So we just need to apply the appropriate antidotes. And then, for example, if we're just being if we're lacking effort, then also we should make sure that we apply ourselves. And then finally, actually, there could be a time when we're actually doing okay, and we might just think, oh, I should still remedy it somehow. That's why it's important to just relax. So anyway, Rinpoche, he explains this in some detail. I have some, here, for example, laziness. It can be, there are four antidotes for just laziness: inspiration, endeavor, faith, and proficiency that comes as we practice. Counteracting forgetfulness, mindfulness of words and meaning, and simply just coming back to something where we like Togmé says, you know, we know we have a toothbrush, we know what to do with it. That sort of very simple, straightforward attitude. And then just we need to be aware of how our mind is going, and actually apply antidote if it's needed. If we're dull, then really apply ourselves. And if we're not, if we don't need any kind of remedying, then just to relax, not thinking, you know, that we always need to be remedying something. Sometimes it's okay, just relax. So there's 9 ways of settling the mind, and this is essentially bringing the mind back to being present. Then it wanders again. We understand the significance of it, and so they're increasing ways of gradually perfecting our ability to settle the mind, and Rinpoche, he describes that. And as we do that, then there's various degrees of experience that happen where first we have the thoughts and our distraction is like all the time on and off. That's like a waterfall. Then we realize how speedy we are, yet we're beginning to be more present within what's happening with our mind. And then there's a place where we're present and there's just a sense of ease. Yet it's not as if there's not something happening. There's still plenty happening under the surface. And then eventually we begin to have some confidence where there's calm, but of course there's still things on the surface that there's slight disturbances like ripples. And then finally we have meditation that is like a still ocean. From the depth, from the surface and down to the depth, it's calm. So that's shamatha. So then the next is vipassana, which is essentially what emerges out of that calm. It's the actual insight. And that's really the objective of the path. The objective of the path is not to just go into some particular condition of absorption. It really is to free ourselves from confusion and break free from this ordinary absorption of our self-centering and our confused dualistic relationship with ourself and the world. So that's where just being calm is just a temporary remedy. That's not an objective in itself. So for us to really get to the bottom of our afflictions, this requires that we have vipassana, actual insight. Insight, okay, I'll give an example that we often use, which is when we, for example, at dusk, we might be out walking on a path and all of a sudden we think we have a snake in front of us. And then we look, we actually see there is no snake, it's just a rope. Now that's insight. That's where initially there's a misunderstanding of what is actually there. And when we have insight, it's not like the snake goes away or we negotiate with the snake or the external savior saves us from the snake. It's just because we see things for what they are. And that's what vipassana is. It's where we begin to see through the hoax, the delusion of samsara, the delusion of fixating on what has no reality. So that's where we need to eventually get to the practice of vipassana. Now, when we practice, and it doesn't matter if we're practicing calm abiding or vipassana, there has to be this unified practice of wisdom and compassion, that we are uncovering the nature of reality, and we're doing that with the motivation of wishing to benefit all beings. So we have this presence of wisdom and compassion. Now, this applies both when we are meditating and also in post-meditation. Also in post-meditation, through wisdom, we have less self-centering, we're more selfless, and with that also we have more compassion. This applies throughout meditation and post-meditation. Now, we could say meditation is a place where we have less confusion, and post-meditation is something where we more emphasize interaction and compassionate interaction with the world around us. But there's one taste in this. It's really the same thing. It's the dispelling of our confusion, where naturally the warmth of compassion manifests. So ultimate realization doesn't really have, on one hand you have meditation here with the wisdom, and here you have post-meditation with its compassion. Ultimate realization is that which is free from any notion of meditation and post-meditation. So Khyentse Rinpoche says, as compassion is always united with wisdom, the union of sustained calm and profound insight is biased neither towards samsara nor toward nirvana. Wisdom is experientially understood during meditation. Compassion is wisdom's natural expression and develops during post-meditation. Eventually, meditation and post-meditation merge into one, and the ultimate nature, devoid of conditions, concepts, or characteristics, is actualized. Now we include here a little comment from Shiching Gyaltsab Pema Namgyal, who was Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's really root teacher. He says, as far as concentration, which is what we're talking about here, meditation, it can be done by the kind we have for ordinary beings. And that's simply just basically what we call mindfulness. That's just settling the mind. It becomes calm. We have some equanimity. We're not necessarily driven by dullness or agitation. We're just present. But that's still just staying in a state of mind. We're just there, oh, I'm really still now. Great. That's very nice, but it doesn't really amount to more than just being exactly that, still, which is nice. But like we often would say, even what do you call it? We would say what Khyentse Rinpoche says, an old yak out in the mountains, or we sometimes say, what are these? Marmots, Tibetan marmots, they hibernate, just like bears hibernate. So just being calm like that is not going to be particularly helpful. It doesn't really get to the bottom of things. So we need then discerning concentration, and that's where initially we have the discerning concentration, which is about analysis, analytical meditation. That's where we look at things and we see what is it really, what are the phenomena that I'm so caught up on? What are they really? The whole drama around ego, the whole drama about all the stuff. What is it really? And that's where we analyze and discover that how nothing actually possesses absolute nature. Nothing, we would say, withstands analysis. So that's where we discover emptiness. Now, that is really just an antidote. That's just one side of the coin, but it's good because that enables us to begin to see a little bit what the nature of phenomena is. But of course, it's still just a thought. Things are empty. The real concentration of the Tathagatas is actually beyond any kind of thought or intellectual assessment of reality. And that's what we call the path of seeing. So that's what we call the seeing the nature of reality. That's where the concentration of the Tathagatas begin. And at the 8th bhumi, the 8th bodhisattva level, then meditation and post-meditation begins to fuse. And of course, at the level of enlightenment, there's just this complete absence of delusion and a constant evenness. So then finally, so that was about meditation. Give us some idea about meditation. Now we're going to talk about really what is the scope of vipassana, which is then transcendent wisdom. Prajna, shira. So there in verse 30, we read, in the absence of wisdom, perfect enlightenment cannot be attained through the other 5 perfections alone. Therefore, to cultivate wisdom combined with skillful means and free from the 3 concepts is the practice of the bodhisattva. So if we just have the first 5 perfections, which are generosity, discipline, patience, endeavor, and concentration, if we just have these without wisdom, then we won't have enlightenment. We still won't get to the bottom of delusion. These will just provide good karma and pleasant circumstances. To cultivate wisdom is then what bodhisattvas do, and they do so without the 3 concepts, which is they essentially eliminate the concepts of subject, object, and action, the notion of I am doing this. So we would say that the 2, again, compassion and wisdom, they're inseparable. They need to be practiced as a unity. And that is what essentially wisdom truly is. Real wisdom is free from any self, and so it's naturally compassionate. And such compassion is free from these 3 concepts, so it's naturally wisdom. Now, as far as developing wisdom goes, it requires that we actually develop some sharpness or intelligence. And that's where we study and develop within the ordinary world what really sort of increases our intelligence. The sciences then, what is it here? Medicine, logic, what are the other ones? Logic, language, medicine, logic, language, and the crafts. And then there's philosophy. That's where we begin to study with the tenets, and that's then the 5th science, and that's again we would say the tenets here are really just the Shravaka Pratyeka Buddha tenets that enables us to understand the confused nature of samsara. Then there's the greater wisdom, which is then the wisdom of realization. That's something which is beyond the intellect. And that's where we then talk about the wisdom as it's understood in a Mahayana context. So that's where, like it says in where the bodhisattva in the 9th chapter, the absolute wisdom is beyond the intellect. So Shantideva says, all who fail to know and penetrate this secret of the mind, the Dharma's peak, though they may wish for joys, all sorrows spent, they'll wander uselessly in misery. So without this quality of wisdom, as much as we might wish to be free from all the kind of sorrows of samsara, eventually when our karma exhausts, unless we have wisdom, we're still cycling in that circle. However, if we were to have really insight into wisdom, then it says, the darkness of thousands of years is instantly dispelled by one lamp. The negativities of 1,000 kalpas are instantly purified by realizing the nature of mind. So we shouldn't despair. It's very possible to understand the nature of reality. This is what the entire path is about. For those who really practice diligently, there are many men and women who have this realization. And so from the time of the Buddha down until today, there have been many persons who gained liberation. Tilopa says the nature of mind is the space beyond the contents of thoughts. So with some inspiration here about what we mean with the nature of mind and wisdom, we then appreciate what it is that we're talking about when we talk about prajna. So again, here we have another commentator, a student of Paltra Rinpoche, actually originally a great master of the Gelug tradition, Minya Kunsan Sona. And he says, wisdom, as the Shastras make clear, is in essence an accurate distinguishing or investigating knowledge of the phenomenon in question. This includes, so that's where wisdom is discerning, not being deceived. Like it's for example, investigating a phenomenon, well, that's what we do, for example, when we look at that snake and see, there is no snake there. It is in fact just a rope. So that's where we mean with, again, this quality of prajna. So we have various kinds of prajna insights. There's wisdom that understands relative truth, which is the wisdom of expertise in the traditional 5 or 4 sciences. Essentially, healing, logic, language, the crafts, and philosophy. So there we bundle them together as relative truth. And then we have the wisdom that understands absolute truth, which is wisdom regarding the absence of true existence. Whether understood, this is important, whether understood as an abstract notion or by direct experience. And that's where it's important to first that we need to understand absolute truth as an abstract notion, just understanding that things cannot exist with inherent existence, otherwise they would be stuck. It's impossible to have phenomena have true existence, and with this we should understand intellectually. But of course, the goal is not to have that intellectual understanding, but to ultimately really have the direct experience in which we're free from the, you say, implication or the enmeshment or the being caught by confusion that projects solidity. And to be entirely free of that is direct experience. And that is the wisdom that understands the absence of true existence. And then finally, there's wisdom that understands how to accomplish being's benefit, which is knowledge of how the temporal and ultimate benefit of beings may be flawlessly achieved. That's then the wisdom that on one level is about our intentions, and ultimately it's also about what naturally manifests on the basis of our aspirations and on the basis of enlightenment. So the comment here really is just that there are different ways in which wisdoms can be classified. That kind of takes us to the end. I'll take some Q&A now, but I thought we could just conclude with together. I'll read it slowly. Just read through this mind training prayer. And this is something that you could say sums up the whole whole teaching really. So we could, when we want to, when we feel inspired, we could just read this prayer. It's not exactly a 4-line prayer. It goes over a few pages, but we'll read it together slowly. But it is something that is so rich that just reading something like that completely transforms our mind. So this is written by a great bodhisattva called Jakob, who lived in the last century and who was close with all the masters. Like he was very close with the great masters like Khyentse and Ngulchu and so on. Yeah, Mipam Rinpoche. So then there was a question: if a teacher encourages us to eat meat and have sex and drink alcohol, are they teachers we should not follow, or should we follow the teacher's instructions? We wouldn't know. There's no way we could know that unless we actually spend time with the teacher, because you could very well have, some very, very untrustworthy people saying, "Oh, I'm a great tantrika," you know, and you should have sex with me, or we eat meat, or we drink alcohol, and it just, you really need to gauge what kind of person this is. So as for venerating the teachers and read their names properly, would the English language be a problem? It seems there are no and not enough honorific words in English. For example, I feel awkward calling Jakob directly. In Chinese, people would add a title like master or teacher to show their respect. So how do you do it in the English Buddhist community? Thank you. Well, I think it's quite okay you call me Jakob. You can also call me mate. Dude. It's completely all right. But yes, if you are with somebody who actually is a master or a teacher, then it's true, we don't actually have that as elaborate as you have it in Asian languages. We like that, well, to some extent we like that refinement, but it's encapsulated in other ways. For example, very often I would write to my teachers, I would write, "Dear Sir," which is very classical way of, we wouldn't say Sir Khyentse, but we would say Rinpoche. And then when I write to Rinpoche, I might write, "Dear Sir." So there are ways around it. It's true, we wouldn't say Master so-and-so. Sometimes have Reverend, if you have, but that's sort of a little bit more Christian, really. Anyway, yeah, "Dear Sir," there are ways around it. There are ways around it. Yeah. But it's true, yeah, we don't really have that so much. Anyway, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just myself, just Jakob. Someone asked, is it possible to listen to this again? Well, yes, it's being recorded. So with the registration link that you received, you also have the link to the Dropbox folder where the recordings are, both audio and video. Yeah. Is it best to examine your own feelings around the act of sex? Is your attachment, i.e. your attachments and physical feelings? Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're not a celibate person, then you shouldn't have any guilt around it. Then it's completely fine. So, of course, if you're somebody who's practicing, then yes, you could be aware of how, of course, what happens with sex and romance is that a lot of attachments develop, and so that's where some awareness of this, and this tricky, but yes, to not be completely engulfed in, and caught up by these attachments. So there are various kinds. They can be about sex, they can be about, I don't know, cars or bowling, or, we just tend to get caught up in things. So whenever it is actually about objects of desire, we need to be attentive to our attachment. Dear sir, wow, nice. Yeah, that actually works, I think. Yeah. You know, if you're with a teacher, sir, would you like some tea? Like that. Okay, so we'll read this this prayer together. And I'm actually going to bring up the Kindle version. Yeah. Have to leave, very sorry, but we'll catch up later. Happy days and thanks a lot. Okay, bye-bye. So this is a mind training prayer. And there are some. There's various that we have. And this one's particularly beautiful then from Jamgo Kongtrul Lotu time. So it's called The Gateway to the Ocean of Bodhicitta. So kindly join me. By the truth of the ultimate mind of enlightenment, generated by mighty and sublime Avalokiteshvara, and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, may supreme bodhicitta be born. In myself and in all beings under the sky. May the cause of suffering, the anger of all beings, and its result, the heat and cold of the hells, come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky all the merit of my loving kindness and my freedom from anger. Thus may anger's realms, the hells, be emptied. May all hell beings become Avalokiteshvara, the Vajra family, and realize sublime mirror-like wisdom. May the cause of suffering, the greed and attachment of beings, and its result, the thirst and starvation of the spirit realm, come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky all the merit of my open-handed generosity and my freedom from attachment. Thus may the realms of the starving spirits be emptied. May all such beings become Avalokiteshvara of the Padma family and realize sublime discriminating wisdom. May the cause of suffering, the stupidity of beings, and its result, the dumb dullness of beasts, come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky all the merit of my generation and refinement of insight, and my freedom from ignorance. Thus may the animal realm be emptied. May all animals become Avalokiteshvara of the Buddha family and realize the sublime wisdom of the absolute expanse. May the cause of suffering, jealousy, which corrodes the hearts of beings, and its result, the warring of the asuras, come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky all the merit of my patience, expressed in body, speech, and mind, and my freedom from jealousy. Thus may the asura realm be emptied. May all such beings become Avalokiteshvara of the Karma family and realize sublime, all-accomplishing wisdom. May the cause of suffering, the overwhelming pride of beings, and its result, the eventual fall of the gods, come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky all the merit of my endeavor and my freedom from pride. Thus may the realms of the gods be emptied. May all celestial beings become Avalokiteshvara of the Ratna family and realize the sublime wisdom of equality. May the cause of sufferings of beings, negative acts and obscurations since beginningless time, and its result, the suffering of birth, illness, old age, and death, come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky all the merit I have accumulated since beginningless time with my body, speech, and mind. May the realms of destitution be emptied. May all beings become stainless Dhammakaya Avalokiteshvara and realize sublime self-existing wisdom. Downfalls, the generations, breaches, and transgressions of the Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and secret Mahayana vows committed by all beings come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky the merit of upholding the three kinds of vows. May their vows become utterly pure, unstained by the slightest degeneration. May they all achieve the level of Vajrasattva, embodiment of all families. May the negative karma, obscurations, and short life caused by killing, destruction of sacred objects, and the like come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky, my generation of bodhicitta and the 10 transformations. May premature death become a term unheard of. May all beings achieve the level of Vajra Amitayus. May the illnesses of beings caused by imbalances of wind, fire, flame, and other elements come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky all the merit of my abandonment of any kind of violence and provision of medicine and other beneficial things. I offer them my own health and well-being. May all beings achieve the level of the medicine Buddha, the body of lapis lazuli light, which dispels the ills of the 3 poisons. May the thirst, hunger, and poverty caused by stealing and taking by force the goods of others come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky dharma, wealth, and the fruits of generosity. May they enjoy this sky treasure, the effortless and spontaneous fulfillment of all needs. May the negative karma and obscurations caused by constant harmful activities that lead to rebirth and impure feelings come to me, dissolve into me. I dedicate to all beings under the sky my generation of bodhicitta and the 10 transformations. May they be reborn in the pure Buddha fields, such as true joy and realm of bliss. May the negative karma and obscurations caused by the constant harboring of false views, which displeases 3 jewels, come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky the merit of developing the 3 kinds of faith. May they develop complete conviction in the infallibility of the law of cause and effect, and replace their negative acts with positive ones. May attachment and aggression, which arise from constant focus on the self and lead to perceiving everything as a threat, come to me, dissolve into me. I give to all beings under the sky all my merit born of 4 boundless thoughts. May their minds be filled with kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Source of all suffering, the deluded mind which takes illusory perceptions as real, come to me, dissolve into me. I offer to all beings under the sky the realization of egoless emptiness. May profound emptiness dawn in their minds, and may they attain perfect Buddhahood. In short, I take all suffering brought about by change, by encountering what one does not wish, the 16 sources of fears and so forth, by being parted from what one likes, relatives and friends, places, food and riches, by being unable to keep what one has, when protecting kinsmen, vanquishing opponents, and toiling in agriculture and trade, by being unable to get what one wants, power, possessions, and fame, by being struck by certain adversities and evil influences. I take all these upon me, on top of my own ego clinging, while without keeping anything, I give to all beings all my merit of past, present, and future. I give to all beings my influence and power, my body, my very life. May all beings enjoy happiness and well-being and perform the deeds of bodhisattvas. May all beings who have made connection with me in good or in bad ways, through my teaching them the Dharma and urging them to virtue, or through my eating their flesh, drinking their curds, or riding upon them, or through having faith and respect in me and giving me food and wealth, or through criticizing me, doubting me, thinking ill of me, robbing me, beating me, harming me, in short, whoever has seen me in person, heard my name, thought of my good or bad qualities, or even been touched by the wind coming from my direction, may their harmful actions and obscurations, built up since time without beginning, come to an end. May they be led to the realm of great bliss by the great compassionate one, the sublime Mahakarunika. May I be able to benefit beings through my body, speech, and mind, even through my shadow. May all beings of ill will, human and non-human, who strive to harm my body and my life, be the very first to reach enlightenment. And may not even the least harm ever come about because of me. When we investigate phenomena, we find nothing has true existence. Everything is a dream, a mirage, a reflection like moon and water. Nonetheless, everyone is fooled by taking things as real. In absolute truth, I and all other beings under the sky, even non-human entities, evil spirits, and obstacle makers, are equal to in the sphere of emptiness. Yet in taking what is empty as real, we are all deluded. In relative truth, there is not a single being who has not been the parent of everyone else, and who in the whole world has more kindness than a father or a mother. What a delusion it would be for a mother to wish to harm her child. This is why, remembering without preference the kindness of all those parent beings, I shall offer them gain and victory, and take loss and defeat for myself. By the power of this, my pure intention, may all beings purify their misdeeds and perfect their accumulations, effortlessly arouse sublime bodhicitta, which is emptiness suffused with compassion, the unerring path of the victorious ones, and swiftly attain the omniscience of Buddhahood. So, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, he writes, to give form to his aspiration for mind training, Dilgo Khyentse made this heartfelt prayer in a lonely mountain hermitage. May it be beneficial and auspicious. So this is what we call the colophon. So I'd like to thank you all for attending this study of the sublime teachings, really, from Ngulchu Togmé, with the commentaries of great masters, particularly Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. It's a great privilege to really present this, and I'm happy, very happy that you all provided the conditions so that we could do this together. So thank you very, very much. Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Okay, we'll dedicate. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish evermore. Okay. Okay, thank you. So actually, we're going to have another study this year. I just can't remember what it is, the next one we're studying. Maybe is it magic dance? I think the next one we're studying might be Chili Noble Images Magic Dance. I'm not sure, but I think so. Anyway, you'll find out when that happens. Anyway, presently, it's wonderful we could complete this study together. So thank you all. Keep practicing. Thank you. Okay, thanks.